I'm the bad guy. I'm the, I'm the, I'm the bad.
The three-peat is still on. The Eagles soar. Allen wins the MPV shootout. And in Detroit, a rookie QB takes charge and leads his team to beat the NFC favourites in the underdog story of the weekend. Yes, the divisional games are in the bag and the championship games are set as we take one step closer to seeing who is going to Super Bowl 59. Welcome to Across the Gridiron. I'm Matt, and as ever, I'm joined by Eddie as we break down the action from last weekend. Eddie, lots to talk about this week. But what in particular stands out to you?
Matt, I've got to say, this weekend had everything more than I hoped for, except one thing that I really wanted that didn't happen, but we'll go into that. But listen, it was a great, great weekend. Lots of shocks. We've got storylines, we've got drama, we've got hot takes. You want to stick around for those. And listen, right, guys, first of all, let me just say thank you to all of you that have been subscribing to the channel. Please hit that like and subscribe button if you love what we're saying. And we love to hear from you as well. But Matt, let's get into this because this was one heck of a division weekend.
No, absolutely. It really was a fantastic weekend, but again, a strange one in lots of ways. I think I think this is the first time this is ever happened, or certainly the first time it's happened for a long time. But every single team that lost this weekend had more yards than the team who beat them. It's just been absolutely crazy. But look, we're going to break down the action from all four games. And look, let's start with probably the shock. Well, certainly the shock of the weekend, maybe even a shock of certainly of the players, maybe shock of the season. And that is the Washington Commanders, who beat one of the favorites for the Super Bowl in Detroit Lions. They beat them 45-31. This win sends Washington Commanders to its first NFC Championship game since 1991. Now, the biggest thing for me was turnovers. The turnovers were absolutely key in this one. Jayden Daniels, who will wax lyrical about soon, he had 0 turnovers again, where Goff, he had a bit of a mare. We'll break down all the key points, but coming into this game, Eddie, or coming out of this game, I should say, what were your sort of main takeaways?
There's trouble in the East, right? There's trouble in the East because this rookie quarterback is just something phenomenal. I've been watching the NFL for a pretty long time. And I am always very, very defensive when rookie quarterbacks come out and people start saying that the best thing since Peyton Manning and Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady and all of that. And I really resisted that with CJ Stroud last season because I even said, listen, I think that he's going to take a step back, which he did this season. But Jayden Daniel, I don't even know how to process what I saw in that game. I was looking for all the typical things that you would expect rookie quarterbacks to be tripped on. Pressure, understanding coverages, handling setbacks, handling the pressure of the game. This guy, I think we spoke about it in the last show where he's talking about game-winning drives that he's had in the season. And you could tell that if this guy doesn't know he's in the NFL, someone needs to wake him up because I think that he's forgotten that he's in the NFL and all the pressure that goes with it, he's completely blind to it. If this was wrestling, right? We're both fans of wrestling. This will feel
new podcast coming soon.
Yes, new podcast coming soon. So watch out for that. If this was wrestling, you would almost think that this was the passing of the torch, right? How the older wrestler puts the younger wrestler over. You almost had a bit of that with Goff, almost kind of on his way out of the NFL. And then you had Jayden Daniel coming in, the young buck coming into the ring, almost like he reminds me of Randy Orton. Remember when Randy Orton came into the wrestling and a second generation wrestler coming in Monica with Legend Killer and all of that. And everything was just great because he just had that great story. Jayden Daniel has got a great story, and I'm all here from it. And as a Cowboy fan who should absolutely despise the Commanders, I can't help but just have a soft spot for what's happening with the Commanders right now with Jayden Daniels. It was amazing, man.
So yeah, well, first of all, I just want to time that. I think that was 2 minutes until we got a Cowboys reference in there, so it's quite late for you, Eddie. Well done. And I suppose where I was maybe slightly disagree. I mean, the thing is, the idea is of like passing the torch. It's supposed to be ceremonial, but Goff didn't just pass the torch; he passed the ball repeatedly to Washington. I mean, we'll come on to the Lions in themselves, in a bit, but going back to Daniels, he finished the game, 22 out of 33 passing, 299 yards, two touchdowns, 16 carries for 51 yards, and again, zero turnovers. He's the only rookie quarterback other than Joe Flacco in 2008 for the Baltimore Ravens. He's been the only rookie QB, I should say, to beat a number one seed in the playoffs. This guy, as you said, was absolutely fearless. He drove the Commanders here.
And I'll tell you why his own was better than Joe Flacco. His defense, the Commanders' defense, are not top five. They're a middle of the pack. So to do that, and Joe Flacco, if I remember, his defense was probably top three, top four. If someone would check that and put that in the chat, but those guys did it with elite defenses. This defense is not top 10 in Commanders defense. So that for me tells me there is a lot more about the Jayden Daniels than it is about the rest of the surrounding cast. Now, of course, everybody else is playing a part, special teams, defense, and all of that. But if you look at some of the other guys, even Roethlisberger for Steelers, when he did his own thing, he had a solid defense. And for me, that's what makes Jayden Daniels' performance even more remarkable. He doesn't turn the ball over as well.
No turnovers in his two games in the playoffs is just exceptional. I mean, you say, okay, across the season, the Commanders' defense hasn't been a top 10 defense. They stepped up today, so this weekend, forced five turnovers, three interceptions off Goff, and the main thing is when you've got a defense who is showing up, what you have to do as an offense is make those turnovers count. And that's the one thing that they did perfectly. Commanders scored 3 touchdowns off 5 turnovers. So that is being clinical, right? And it's demoralizing for the Lions offense. Yes, you're giving the ball back. You're giving the ball to the Commanders, who are just taking it down the other end and are scoring on you pretty much every single time. This was probably one of the best rookie QB, may even be sort of one of the best rookie QBs of all time, especially if he gets to the Super Bowl. But let's talk a little bit about the Lions. They came into this hot favorites, certainly not only for this game, but for the NFC and also potentially for the Super Bowl. I mean, these guys have been absolutely flying this season. But we mentioned the issues that Jared Goff has. Dan Campbell's come out and said, look, we simply didn't get it done. He didn't have any other answer. He was just Goff's come out and blamed himself like all sort of quarterbacks do when he put up numbers like that. But this wasn't just down on Goff, right? Because yes, he was turning the ball over, but there were times like, I forget what quarter it was, but at one point the Lions had an inexcusable 12 men on the field penalty. And this was right before the Commanders had a really important 4th down. I think it was they were inside the 10-yard, but it was like 4th and 2 or something along those lines.
Yeah.
A stupid penalty they gave away, and therefore Washington have an automatic 1st down, and then they score within that play. It was just not like the Lions to make that kind of inexcusable rookie mistake, really, as a coaching side. But where do you think this leaves the Lions?
They are. This is going to be very difficult. There's going to be a lot of players, coaches who are going to be having sleepless nights because If there was another team, let's think about this at the start of the year, right? When the season is about to start, we'll probably say that there's only maybe a handful of teams that expect to go very far in the season, right? So probably you've got the Kansas City Chiefs there, maybe the Ravens, are in there. To an extent, before the collapse 49ers, you would have kind of expected them to be coming into the season thinking, they're gonna go far. And then, okay, let's throw in the to that.
Let's not.
But the Lions been one of those teams that would have been expected to go all the way. So you know what they say about is the hope that kills, the expectation that kills. Everything was lining up for the Lions, to get to the Super Bowl. 15-2 season, right? You can't ask anymore, of the players. You can't ask anymore, of the staff. You can't ask any more of a team, to go into the league, to go into the season and, expect to get there. So everything was going well. So you go into that game with all the confidence in the world. You've earned the number one seed. So you had your bye, you've rested your players, and your players are coming back. You go and you play a six seed team that you're expected to beat, and then you come out with a loss. It's gonna sting for a while. And it's difficult to run it back the third time. The 49ers tried it and see how they collapsed. They had the team running back the second time. It also took them very, very close. And then the third time, you start having players are going to ask for money and contracts and stuff like that. Coaches are going to be looked at by other teams. And then slowly and surely, you start to lose the window. And I think the Lions are going to be preparing themselves for that because there's going to be players on free agency that are going to be leaving as well. You're going to have to think, do I need to pay some more players? There are coaches, people are already talking about Ben Johnson going up for a head coaching role. So I think they're gonna need a minute to get over this, but this is gonna sting because they wouldn't have expected this to happen. And listen, Golf gave the ball away, but Jameer Gibbs still did Jameer Gibbs things. He still ran the ball pretty well. But it's the playoffs, it's the business season. If you turn the ball over, you're more likely to lose. I think that's almost what you can see in the playoffs this season. The teams that turn the ball over, they don't come back from it. You're not going to have a five interception game and still win the game. That's for regular season, not in the postseason. So the
Yeah.
Lions are going to be feeling very sore.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll talk about turnovers quite a lot when we pick up on our next game. But I suppose the only bit I'll kind of mention about the Lions is that it felt like this was almost their sort of big chance to get Super Bowl. The pressure just
Mm,
just got to them. They were always chasing the game. Goff was making plays that he wouldn't normally, throws he wouldn't normally do. And what I thought was most interesting, you and I were mentioning our sort of WhatsApp chats while this game was going on.
mm,
It's like normally it's the Lions who have been brave on fourth downs, but it
yeah,
was the Commanders. They
yeah,
barely punted.
yeah.
And again, it's like me when I play Retro Roll 25 on the iPad. I just can't be asked to punt. I'll make the fourth down. And
Just
that's
go for it.
exactly what the Commanders did. They were super aggressive, super impressive. And yeah, Lions need to lick their wounds, pardon the pun, and see what they can go do again next year. But we'll come on to who Commanders are going to play later on the show. But let's go to the other big story. This was the
Ooh,
the MVP shootout as it was billed, even though the MVP has already been decided and it's not the MVP shootout at all, but still, yeah, there's narratives to be had. The Buffalo Bills beat the Ravens 27-25 in the big game in the AFC. This was Lamar versus Allen, and it was Allen who came on top. But in the end, only just. The Ravens missed a game-tying 2-point conversion with 1:33 on the clock. The the Bills now go on to face their great playoff nemesis, the Kansas City Chiefs, who obviously we'll talk about later. But again, this was down to the defense of the Bills forcing those turnovers. This was the Ravens changing again their identity. We've talked about this before. They know who they are. They run the ball. They run the ball. But again, they did not do that enough in this game. Too many mistakes, too many turnovers. This was such a disappointing way for the Baltimore Ravens to go out the playoffs.
It was mad, and this was probably one of my games of the weekend.
But there was,
We,
there was only there was only four, so you didn't. There wasn't a lot of choice.
there wasn't a lot of choice, but it was absolutely. And the funny thing was that I was watching this game. I was actually in the hospital when I was watching the game. We were waiting to be seen, and I had the game on my phone, and I was just watching it, and I was just like, I can't believe this is happening. And first of all, I want to say I called this. I did call the Buffalo Bills. We're gonna beat the Ravens, and for me, Josh Allen has been playing like a man possessed for a long time. And I think you can add that to the MVP energy because people are probably saying that already Lamar is the one getting it as well. And this was a game that Josh Allen was like, I want to show you guys that he's not really better than me. And my argument for Josh Allen throughout the season, because I've been on the bandwagon about him being the MVP, is that I look at the games that Josh Allen has played, the opposition that he's won against. He won against the Kansas City Chiefs. He won against the Lions quite well. I know he lost against the Ravens, but remember what I said in that show? I said when you play a team that is so similar to you and they beat you that terribly in the regular season, there's always a correction that happens. And you can see that right from the very first half, they were like, Derrick Henry is not going to beat us, right? We are going to make sure that he doesn't pop off for any reason. So they contain Henry pretty well. Now, they will now say, okay, Lamar, let's see what you got, right? Okay, you can beat us with a few runs here and there, but can you consistently throw the ball into your players and get the work done? And for me, execution was the difference in this game, right? The Bills, a lot of third down and long situations they converted, right? And Ravens didn't do it in the red zone. Their efficiency in the red zone took a nosedive in the worst possible way. There's something that is going on my mind about Lamar Jackson, and you're gonna say, okay, what's he talking about?
Let
How
me just let me let me
different,
just kick back. Let me just relax. Okay.
how different is Lamar Jackson from Dak Prescott? Great in the regular season, not so great in the postseason. Now, people can say what they want about how these two players look. Lamar Jackson looks like Action Jackson, throwing for all the yards. But they almost have the same record in the postseason. Dak Prescott 3-4 in the postseason. Lamar 3-5 in the postseason, right? And people kill Dak Prescott for having a great regular season and not doing it in the postseason. Lamar has had two MVPs in the regular season and potentially a third one unanimous MVP as well. So I think for me, this question is going to be asked, right? Is he the nearly guy, right? That gets to the postseason and doesn't finish the job. And all season, I kept talking about the Ravens not embracing who their identity was. You've got weapons, you can run the ball. But are you so determined to show Lamar as a passer and not allow them to run the ball? You saw there was a sequence in the game. I think it was in the third quarter when they came back from the second half and they ran for like 60 something yards, got into the end zone, scored. And they only did that once. And then they went back to like trying to like do all kinds of fancy stuff, to get into the end zone. For me, I think it's fair to start to ask the question, right? Some players are judged very differently. And I think that Josh Allen has always been judged looking at Patrick Mahomes, right? He's always been judged like that. He can't do it, right, in the big games. He's always losing to Kansas City Chiefs and all of that. But I think that this might be his year. I thought that this was a referendum on Lamar in this game.
I mean, I think referendum on the model might be a bit harsh. I mean, he came out, he was very solemn at the end of this, and I think the problem is if you compare it to Prescott and you compare it to the Cowboys, the AFC for the past few years has been an incredibly tough division or tough
Okay.
championship side to get out. It's been stronger than the NFC. You know, Lamar to get to the playoffs, he's pretty much got to beat Allen and beat Mahomes, right? And I mean, look, if he wants to go on and be this elite plus quarterback with all the history, he has to go out and do it. And obviously, he hasn't done it. I think for me that the key thing we talked about in the last game was turnovers, right?
Mm.
So let me just see if I got the stats up here. So yeah, so the Bills forced three turnovers, which was obviously one interception and two
Fumble.
fumbles.
Yeah.
So the most, if you're a Ravens fan, the most frustrating thing, this after this they set a franchise record this season for the fewest turnovers in a season.
That's
But then
fair.
they coughed the ball up three times when it mattered the most. And we talk about the Commanders being clinical when they've turned the ball over. The Bills scored 10 points in the drives following turnovers, so they were making those turnovers count. And this isn't necessarily a short term thing for Ravens. Looking back over the playoff history, the Baltimore are now 0-12 in franchise history when losing the turnover battle
Yeah.
in the playoffs.
Mm.
So if they lose a turnover battle, they lose the game.
Yeah.
If they win that turnover battle or that margin is at least tied, they're 18-2.
Wow.
So if
Wow.
if you know that information and you've got the strength of the running of Lamar, the strength of running of Henry, you run it. Now you could argue that the Bills did really well. The Bills focused on that, you know, the Bills focused on where they might think that the Ravens are going to be strong, and the defense just came. The Bills' defense just came up on top. They sort of stole the show. Really, Allen was great. He was clinical, but he actually had the fewest passing yards, or one of his lowest passing yards all season.
Mm.
Right, so he wasn't releasing the ball. He was running, and the Bills focused on their running game from an offensive perspective. It's yeah, it's the Ravens. I just think they just got this game wrong.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, right? I know I was a little bit harsh on Lamar. I do think that he does deserve it, but also I think it's because of the narrative that has been building around him. Because I think this year, this season, they sort of said he's done something that quarterback has ever done. It's been sensational and all of that. But this was a game that was played in some difficult conditions, right? Difficult conditions to throw the ball. It's notoriously difficult to throw the ball. So, which was why, for me, I think both teams went into the game thinking, let's just do enough to get out of this game, get our win, and move on, right? This is not supposed to be our best performance type of game, but you're just going to play it. And listen, if you take the turnovers away, then it was probably a very even game and it could have been a coin flip, right? But you can't ignore the turnovers. But I think even still with that, Lamar still marched down the field. So you got to give him credit.
Oh yeah,
Marched down
definitely.
the field with an opportunity to tie the game. And if Andrews focused on catching the ball, and hey, listen, never played football in my life, right? So who am I to be speaking harshly of players that have been doing it week in and week out? But it felt to me like the ball comes into the box and the striker absolutely skies it from 5 yards away from the goal. And people always say he probably was already celebrating the goal before the ball came in and he kicked it.
Don't we call that the Kai Havertz syndrome?
I knew you were going to.
You open the door, mate. I'm going to walk through it.
Yeah, that I deserve that. I walked right into that one. Um, so I think he was thinking to himself, I'm in the end zone. I'm just gonna catch this ball and then I'm just gonna turn and fall into the end zone. But the first thing you've got to catch the ball. And he didn't, and that was it. And very unfortunate, the most painful way to lose a game because you're so close to still being in the game and then you lose it that way. But hey, um, Lamar's narrative is going to be ever painted until he goes far in the playoffs. He's going to be looked at as the guy that only does it in the regular season, which is quite funny because Baltimore Ravens had a player who never did it in the regular season and only did it in the playoffs with Joe Flacco. So this seems like a twist of worlds right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, the Bills march on. They're going to play the Chiefs, and we'll talk about the Chiefs later on. So
I'm the bad guy. I'm the